Now let's take care of publishing our articles, and this will be a feature available to a new role called Publisher. Behind the scenes, I've created a field, Published Ad, for article, and then whenever you create new article, there's a checkbox, published or not. And this is kind of a trick I like to use, similar to created ad. I want to save some flags instead of a checkbox in the database, a timestamp, so it's more useful to know when it was published, not just if it was published. So quick recap, I've added a migration to articles table. So this is the timestamp. By default, it is null. Then in article model, I've added that as a fillable. Then in the index blade, it is viewed as published ad without any operations. Then in create blade, it is a checkbox with value 1 or empty. And then in the controller, it transforms the value, whether it is published, then it is now a carbon operation, otherwise it is null. So that all works. And now our task is to hide that published from a simple user. And with this, we have third role in the system. So we have user, we have administrator, and we have publisher. The most straightforward way to do that would be another new column in the users table, like is publisher. But at this point, if we have more than 2 roles, if it's not just a boolean 0 or 1, I would introduce a roles table. So this is what we will do now, create a roles table and then change user is admin to user role ID. So PHP artisan make model role -m for migration, and then we will add artisan make migration add role ID to users table. So let's start with the migration. So for roles, all we need is string name. And one more thing we will do, you can actually see the data in the migrations. And this is a different topic for another separate video or even course, how to deal with migrations if that contains the data. By default, the data is about seeding the data, but in this case, we are creating roles and we need those roles right away. For the next migration, we would add role ID with default as a simple user. So we cannot create a separate seeder and run that later. Because of that, we will do this. So roles will be array of user, administrator, and publisher. And for each of those roles, we will create that. So role, create, name, role. That. And in role model, we need to make that fillable. Fillable, name. So that's one migration for the roles. And then another migration, we will have a role ID. And this is an important part. Unsigned begins your role ID with default value 1, so I'm assuming that role ID 1 is a simple user, and it will be hard-coded in the database level. This is why we need the data by then. Otherwise, if we don't have role ID 1 by this point, that migration will fail. So role ID, it should be added also to user model. And now, what do we do with that is admin? That field is irrelevant by then, right? So we need to run another data transformation in the same migration. So add role ID and we should assign user where is admin equals 1, update role ID equals 2. And then we can remove that column. So table users, table remove column is admin. Be careful with removing columns and generally make a backup of your database or make some automated tests so you wouldn't lose any data. So that's what will be done with migrations. But now in the code we still have that is admin. How do we ensure that the code isn't breaking? And we will add so-called accessor to our model, which is get is admin attribute. This is Laravel documentation for that, so we can assign some attribute and get its value by calculating that. Important part, the camel case here is transformed to snake case in the actual variable. So this is exactly what we need. Is admin as a camel case will be transformed as user is admin in lowercase. So it should return a boolean, whether it's admin or not. And we will use this variable from the model. So this role ID equals 2. So if it is role ID number 2, is admin will equal 1 or true. Now let's run the migration and see if we didn't mess anything up. Artisan migrate. No errors. Then I'm logged in as admin. It all still works. So if it was some error, user column would throw any errors. So if I add new article as admin, publish it, save article, seems good. So see how we added a table, then foreign key to that table, and then remove the previous column. And this was all a preparation to what's coming for publisher. Final thing, what we need to do is go to articles create blade, and then do if auth user role ID 3, you would think, but probably that is not that readable. What I would suggest instead is to have another function, is publisher. Is publisher or admin. Admin should probably publish the articles too, right? So is publisher or is admin, then we see that checkbox. And is publisher would be defined in user PHP, pretty similar to this one. So role ID 3 would be is publisher. And similar to that checkbox in edit blade. So articles edit blade should see that checkbox only if it is publisher or admin. And finally, in the controller, we need to also make sure that published ad is only for publishers or administrators. So here, auth user is admin or auth user is publisher, and request exists, probably like this, then we assign it. And in the update, it will be a little more complicated because there could be a scenario of simple user unpublishing the article by mistake. So we transform that into a separate array. Data would be this, and we will add published ad only if it is accessible. So if auth user is admin or auth user is publisher, then we add data published ad equals this. Like that, and then article update is receiving data. To test that, let's create a publisher user. So we log out, we register as a new user, we go into our database, we assign role ID 3, and then if we go to articles, we see all articles, and that is wrong. Oh, that's funny. I've made a rookie mistake. Even after 15 years of development, I'm doing this. So this should be double equal. It should be if statement, not assignment. So be careful with those. Okay, we refresh. No articles found. That is correct. And we need to change the condition in the scope, articles model. So if not admin and not publisher, then we add global scope is publisher. Okay, I see all articles and I see published checkbox and I can publish. But if I register as non-publisher, so register again, new user, simple user, I should not see that checkbox and it should still work. Save article, published ad is empty, and if I edit, I still don't see that article, and if I edit something, published ad, it's still empty. So this is the way how we added third row. Final thing I've noticed in the code is that is admin column wasn't actually removed, so probably need to create another migration separate from that. So we do remove is admin from users table. And again, refresh, And yeah, that column is actually removed. So the error was remove column versus drop column, sorry for that. And in the next lesson, we are getting into permissions. So we will shift from checking the role to adding deeper level of who has permission over which function.